Welcome to the Cyber Guide for the inscriptions that are located on the inside walls of the Thomas Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. Cyber Guides are narrated videos that provide interesting information about notable sites and monuments around town. This Cyber Guide provides information about the inscriptions on the walls of the Jefferson Memorial. Also available are guides for the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, and other significant locations. The Thomas Jefferson Memorial honors the third President of the United States, serving from 1801 to 1809, who was one of the thought leaders of the colonial movement to gain independence from Great Britain. Jefferson was, by most accounts, not a gifted orator. It is not surprising, therefore, that the inscriptions on the walls of the memorial are from his writings, not his speeches. Just below the domed ceiling is an inscription that summarizes Jefferson's attitude toward individual liberty, saying, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." The quote is taken from a letter written by then Vice President Jefferson to Dr. Benjamin Rush on September 23, 1800, and affirms Jefferson's continuing opposition to having a state-sponsored religion. Rush was a physician who became the Surgeon General of the Continental Army under George Washington and signer of the Declaration of Independence. In front and to the left of Jefferson's statue is an excerpt from the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. Although not that well known today, this statute was so important that it is one of 3 accomplishments that Jefferson asked to have carved on his tombstone, along with author of the Declaration of Independence and Father of the University of Virginia. The act was drafted in 1777, introduced into the Virginia General Assembly in 1779, and not passed until January 16, 1786, nearly 9 years after it was first drafted. Legislative acts tend to be dry and legalistic, but Jefferson clearly felt strongly about this one because it is a doozy. It starts by stating the well-accepted doctrine that God intentionally allowed humans to possess free will, as shown in this excerpt. Almighty God hath created the mind free. All attempts to influence it by temporal punishment tend only to beget habits of hypocrisy and meanness, and therefore are a departure from the plan of the holy author of our religion, who, being Lord, chose not to propagate it by coercions as was his almighty power to do. Jefferson then delivers a blistering characterization of those who would use legislative acts to establish a state religion, which he refers to as a false religion. Quote, "That the impious presumption of legislators, setting up their own opinions as the only true and infallible, and as such endeavoring to impose them on others, hath established and maintained false religions." Unquote. He goes on to say that it is wrong to compel financial support of a religion, that civil rights are not dependent on religion, and that the religion itself will become corrupted, and finally that truth, and here Jefferson uses a capital T, is great, and will prevail if left to herself. The final paragraph contains the summation of the legislation. "Be it enacted by General Assembly that no man shall be compelled to frequent support of any religious worship, place, or ministry." Then, on a more positive note, he continues, that all men shall be free to profess, and by argument to maintain, their opinions in matters of religion. The inscription in front and to the right of Jefferson is drawn from a number of sources, including letters, a pamphlet, a book, and his autobiography. The first 3 sentences connect God, life, and liberty, an idea that Jefferson would return to in the Declaration of Independence, and stress the importance of remembering that liberty is a gift. The 4th and 5th sentences condemn slavery, an interesting position from someone who inherited slaves from his father and owned approximately 200 at any given time. Incidentally, Jefferson made multiple attempts to introduce legislation to eliminate or curtail slavery. The website Monticello.org offers this insight. Quote, "Jefferson always maintained that the decision to emancipate slaves would have to be a part of a democratic process, Abolition would be stymied until slave owners consented to free their human property together in a large-scale act of emancipation." Unquote. The sixth sentence of the inscription on the wall of the Jefferson Memorial, which begins with the words, "Establish the law," reinforces Jefferson's belief in the importance of education. The last sentence is from a letter to George Washington in which Jefferson agrees that having government involved in the support and planning of education is a good idea. The inscription behind and to the right of Jefferson is the most controversial. It is excerpted from a July 12, 1816 letter to Samuel Kercheval, an historian who collected oral histories of frontier life in the valleys of the Shenandoah Mountains and the Potomac River. The letter is extremely long, over 3,000 words, and ends with Jefferson's thoughts on whether a constitution should be changed. Here are excerpts from what he wrote. "Some men look at constitutions with sanctimonious reverence and deem them too sacred to be touched. I am not an advocate for frequent and untried changes in laws and constitutions, but I know also that laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind." He continues by agreeing with Kercheval that, if a majority agrees to it, a constitutional convention would be a good idea, saying, "That majority, then, has a right to depute, in other words, to deputize, representatives to a convention, and to make the Constitution what they think will be the best for themselves. Failing to adapt will result in an endless circle of oppression, rebellion, reformation, and oppression, rebellion, reformation again." The controversy surrounding the inscription stems from, among other things, Jefferson asking that the contents of the letter remain private, and the feeling that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was instrumental in getting the Jefferson Memorial funded, was using the quotation for short-term political gain as he fought with the Supreme Court over the constitutionality of the New Deal. The inscription behind and to the left of Jefferson is among the most recognizable in the world. However, the events leading up to the Declaration of Independence are not as well known. On April 19, 1775, Minutemen and Redcoats clashed in Massachusetts at Lexington and Concord, resulting in the shot heard round the world. A year later, it was apparent that reconciliation with Britain was not possible. However, few colonists were openly advocating separation from Britain. On May 15, 1776, the Virginia Convention passed a resolution instructing Virginia's delegates in the Second Continental Congress to, quote, "propose to declare the United Colonies free and independent states," unquote. On June 7th, Richard Henry Lee presented to Congress the Virginia Resolution, which consisted of a mere 80 words arranged into 3 short paragraphs. 3 days later, on June 10th, because delegates from Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and New York had not yet been authorized by their legislatures to vote for independence, the vote was postponed for 3 weeks while visits were made to the legislatures to gain support. On June 11, 5 members of the Congress were appointed to draft a statement explaining why America was leaving the British Empire. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Roger Sherman, Robert Livingston, and Benjamin Franklin comprised the Committee of 5 as they were known. They did not keep a formal record of their proceedings. However, it is known that Thomas Jefferson wrote the first draft. A final draft was presented to Congress on June 28, but it was immediately set aside while Congress debated the first paragraph of the Lee Resolution, which is the part that declared the colonies free and independent states. On July 2nd, the Resolution of Independence was approved by 12 of the colonies, with New York abstaining because they had still not received voting instructions. John Adams, an ardent supporter of independence, wrote to his wife that the 2nd of July, 1776, would be the most memorable in the history of America and should be celebrated with pomp and parade, bells, bonfires, and illumination. He quickly came to understand, however, that July 4th was actually the day that would be remembered, although the Declaration of Independence really served as just an announcement, a formal explanation, if you will, of the rationale for the action taken by Congress in passing the resolution 2 days earlier. Congress spent the remainder of July 2nd debating the wording of the Declaration of Independence, which continued on July 3rd, and was finally approved on the morning of July 4, 1776. Among the changes made before the document became final was the inclusion of the exact words of the Lee Resolution into the final paragraph of the Declaration. The effort by Congress to circulate the Declaration began immediately. Late in the day, on July 4, John Dunlap, a Philadelphia printer, created over 200 printed copies of the Declaration, known as Dunlap Broadsides. On July 6, the Pennsylvania Evening Post printed the text of the Declaration. On July 8, it was read publicly for the first time. On July 9, George Washington ordered that it be read before the Continental Army in New York. On the same day, New York, who had abstained in the vote a week earlier, gave their approval. On July 19, Congress ordered that the words of the Declaration be engrossed on parchment, which produced the copy with florid handwriting that is the iconic version of the document. On August 2nd, nearly a month after the Declaration was approved, most members of Congress signed the engrossed parchment version of the document, with a few waiting until September 4. One signed November 19, and another did not sign until 1781, 5 years after the momentous occasion. We hope you have enjoyed this cyber guide and encourage you to visit some of our other presentations.